Good. Can Hopefully everyone can hear me out there. Just bear with me. Christy, just by thumbs up, make sure everyone can see this. Thank you. I'll tell you, I just told my mom this. Technology is great when it works right. So I first want to say thank you for everything you all do. Everyone listening, Christy, you and your organization, thank you for everything you all do. I want to tell you quickly about myself, but I'll keep it short. I am and forever will be what I call a care partner. A care partner is a phrase I use, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But I started my journey in my mid-20s. I became a care partner for someone I called mom number two. And I'll never forget the first day we were driving back from an appointment, and she received a diagnosis and she understood the words she was being told. And those words were, "You have Parkinson's related dementia." And on that drive back, she looked at me and said, "My worst fear has come true, losing my mind." And that's always stuck with me. But in that moment, I thought, what am I supposed to say to that? What is the right response? Um, but that also helped me learn how to proceed and react and respond to her throughout that journey. So I just wanted to tell you again, I am one of you. Um, and the reason I say that is, first of all, I'm a male, which often I'm the minority in my profession and in these types of circles, but also as a care partner, and I know all of you all are as well. As a professional, there's a place I can go that some can't. If you haven't walked this journey of caregiving, whatever the disease or condition is, there are some things that others just won't understand and won't be able to relate to. And that's just a fact. So we are unique, but we are not alone. So let's dive in. So as all of you know, caregiving most often comes with not a lot of notice. Um, in the instant, a car wreck, a fatal heart attack, unprepared, unexpected diagnosis. So none of us have this, which I would love to have, this clock. The time is now. It's coming. Get prepared. That's not usually how it goes in the world of caregiving. And there's some other things that start to happen as we become this caregiver, but it entails a lot. So when I ask the question to my audiences, how do you define a caregiver? I get a lot of different answers. And then I'll ask, well, what does caregiving entail? And I get a lot of different answers. So for visual purposes, I wanted to share this slide. And the best way I can describe it, I could only fit so many words on here, but let's take a look at this for a moment. Um, Caregiving includes all of these things. You are a cheerleader at times. Um, Chocolate may be the thing that helps you get through that day today. Um, Guilt, feeling guilty, that is something that's wrapped up in our new world. The confidence, it may waver, it may go away. We may not feel any confidence as we go through that. The tears are always there, and that's okay. And again, the patience gets smaller and harder to maintain. And that unselfish watchdog, I love that word. Again, when I talk about care partners and on the professional side, a lot of times I train folks to become what I call watchful companions. There may not be a lot of hands-on personal care being provided at the time, but we are like a watchdog. And for us that are family or personal to this person, it is about them. And we come into this maybe feeling that unselfishness, it's not about me, but then that slippery slope starts to climb and rise, where now we forget about ourselves, and we may not pay attention and take care of some of the things we need to attend to for ourselves. So again, when you ask me, what does a caregiver mean, and what does it entail? It means a lot of things, and it entails all of this and more. And we're going to talk more about this in a minute. But let me also point out the importance and the value of unpaid family caregiving in the US, because I think this is something, again, that we undervalue, that we as caregivers absolutely take ourselves for granted or think we're not worthy. So I just want to point out some things to you all before we get into the meat of this. So first of all, approximately 43.5 million caregivers have provided unpaid care to an adult or child in the last 12 months. Now, this was in 2015. So we're going to start with about 8 years ago. So 43.5 million in 2015, according to an AARP caregiver survey. And about 15.7 million adult family caregivers care for someone who has Alzheimer's or related dementia. Usually I ask the question to my audience, are there any Alzheimer's or related dementia caregivers in the audience? I got a chance to catch the previous workshop, and I know that there are in the audience. 15.7 million. So the economic value of the care provided by unpaid family caregivers of those with just Alzheimer's disease or related dementia in 2014 was $217.7 billion. Now, the value of unpaid caregiving exceeded the value of paid home care and the total Medicaid spending in that same year, and nearly matched the value of sales of the world's largest company, Walmart. 477 billion. Now, in 2021, AARP reported that family caregivers across the US, their unpaid family caregiving was now valued in 2021 at 600 billion. And the report estimates 130 billion increase for unpaid contributions from the US in the next following year. So again, just to put that in perspective, this is what we are contributing and providing in our daily lives. So do not think you are not needed. And it may seem that you're undervalued, but I can tell you from these statistics, you are not. Now, there's some other things that researchers say. You know, the caregiver's journey can be full of ups and downs, and it's different for every person. But research has shown there are stages that all caregivers will go through at some point. And let's just talk about these briefly. So stage one is really that very first day, like my story, getting that news, possibly looking for information and support. But a lot of times when it's a terminal diagnosis, something life-changing, when we hear those words, we don't typically grasp or hear much after that in that first visit, in that first stage. So this is really the early stage where now you've heard those words and you're probably feeling some anticipatory grief. You're that expectant caregiver. What's going to happen? How long? You've got a lot of questions, but you've heard the news. So stage two, you're still a freshman. You're still new at this. And stage two is, you know, you'll probably start to realize the enormity of caregiving tasks that you're facing. And you may begin to seek help and research a little bit. Now, stage three, they say, again, according to research, approximately somewhere around 18 months. So that's still just a little over a year, 2 years, about 2.5 years in this. So at this point, they say you're entrenched in this. You're experiencing that exhaustion that starts to set in. You may realize, many of us don't, like myself, you may realize at this point your own health is starting to suffer a little bit as a result of your own caregiving. And the last stage, stage four, is transitioning. So a transitioning caregiver or care partner in loss. So at this stage, the time has come when you realize you are no longer able to maintain those caregiving duties in the way your loved one may require, or your loved one has passed away and your duties are now over. Regardless, in this stage, we feel a sense of grief and loss and will likely enter some period of mourning now that our caregiving responsibilities have come to an end. Also, at the end of that journey, identity struggles. As the years go by, that becomes our identity as well. And one thing we experience often, and I know I did, was once that journey was over, um, who am I now? This is who I was for so long, and that's a struggle for many of us to reclaim that identity. So let's just get this out of the way. There's more research on what these professional experts tell us is going to happen in the caregiver journey. So this is something called the Caregiver Fatigue Timeline. It was produced by Pacific Advisors. And if you type in on Google or any search engine, the Caregiver Fatigue Timeline, you can find this. And I encourage all my professional partners to share and let other caregivers know about this. Now, the point of this is not to depress and frighten you. This is to really just lay a foundation of normalization, and then we're going to move on. But I think it's important to point this out. This is what they tell us is going to happen when we become caregivers. So in the first to 18 months, again, you're probably still at this point anxious to provide the care. You can keep up those appearances for the most part. Attends to most family relations, remain optimistic, and some of us at this early point may still operate as what I call Superman or Superwoman, and you're still able to attend to most of your personal care. So at 21 months, 21 months, this isn't even 2 years in to your caregiving journey. At this point, research shows this is when we start to begin to take medication, usually maybe for sleeping or headaches. It can become harder and harder to keep on top of things in your daily life. And maybe you have some help from family if it's still available. Now at 24, so now we made it 2 years, 24 to 32 months, emotional and physical resources drained, less and less contact with personal doctor, dentist, minister, and friends. That outside help, if you had it, dwindles away. So now at 32 months, 2 years and 8 months into the journey, stress becomes harder to conceal now. Sometimes caregivers even begin to take stronger medications such as tranquilizers. Sleep is continually disturbed, and the caregiver becomes more irritable and less contact with others. So let me stop there and just point out one thing I notice every time I talk to this. When we start in the beginning and when we end up at 30, 32 months, the help has dwindled if we had it. We've slowly become isolated as well, very common as we care for this person. And so what happens also, our lifelines, our resources personally have dwindled if they existed at all. Some of us don't have that family help. Some of us feel that we had no choice in this matter, and the others don't seem to really care like we do. So again, I tell you this to say this. If you are feeling stressed, if you have that guilt living on your shoulders, constantly talking to you how bad you are, you shouldn't have said that, you should have known better. Um, if you're taking more medication and sleeping less, I'm just telling you this is normal. I want you to know you're not alone, and go back to that statistic of how many other people out there in the millions are feeling and dealing with these things as well. And there's more. This grief and loss that we all hear about and experience at some point. And again, this is different for all of us, but let's talk a little bit about these three things. So, anticipatory grief. If you haven't heard of that, let me explain. When caring for someone over time, we can start to grieve the person long before they die. We grieve the loss of what I'll call the person's former self. Experiencing that loss on a daily basis, as well as anticipating the loss at the end of life, knowing what is coming, can be just as painful as the loss associated at death. So again, I work a lot with people caring for someone with Alzheimer's or related dementia. I can tell you in that world, the anticipatory grief is absolutely there from day one. We have many different phrases and coins for what we call that. Some call it the long goodbye, but it's absolutely there. And that does not mean that it's not there with any other condition, but we see this a lot with dementia. But let me tell you this, ultimately, anticipatory grief is actually a way of allowing us to prepare emotionally for what we know in the back of our mind is the inevitable. And we're all different, but sometimes that preparing for the death of a loved one can even allow family members to maybe contemplate and clear some unresolved issues, make better end of life plans for funeral and burial, and experience their pain in stages. Now, ambiguous loss, that is the loss we experience when someone is, quote, still there, but also not there. And again, this is often experienced when someone has a cognitive impairment from dementia, traumatic brain injury, or even a stroke. We also, however, experience that ambiguous loss when someone with dementia has what I call those moments of lucidity. And if you've experienced this, you know what I'm talking about. When he or she may have that moment where they look very clear and make sense for a short period of time. And let's be honest, in those moments, it's hard not to think that if they can do this every once in a while, they ought to be able to do it all the time. And when they turn back to that confused state, we often experience that anger, frustration, and disappointment again. So that is actually called renewed grief. So that ambiguous loss we experience can kind of propel a cycle of grief. And then there's that grief we all experience at some point, the grief at death. And I want to talk about this for a moment because there's a strong message I want to make sure you all receive out there. Grief is a natural emotion. We've all been told that. It's a universal experience that makes us human. Because it's intense and uncomfortable to feel, as humans, we often try to find ways to avoid experiencing that preponderance of emotion, probably through distraction and busyness. But we grieve because we are deprived of a loved one. The sense of loss is profound, and the change in roles is confounding. And we may become, again, uncertain of that identity of who we are. And grief can last a long time. Again, let me talk about the research. So the research shows That intense grieving lasts from 3 months to a year. And many people continue experiencing that profound grief for 2 years or more. So, this is what that says to me. So, our society expects us to be doing fine in about 2 to 3 weeks. And it's common for us to think something's wrong if our grief lasts too long. But let me tell you this, that grieving process depends on so much: our belief system, our religion, life experiences, and the type of loss we suffered. And we also expect other family members to show that same grief in the same way we do. Even when we say that everyone grieves differently. So, my message here is there is no right or wrong way to grieve. Grief is an individual process. Now, I will share with myself when my grandmother, she lived with dementia for 15 years. And when she passed away, many people said many different things to me. Good intentions, but things like, you'll get your life back. Things like that dangerous trap we all can fall into. They gave me a lot of the at leasts. And those at leasts, again, at least she's not suffering anymore. At least you now can pick up and continue with your life. At least she didn't die in a nursing home. All these things, and again, we mean well, but that actually kind of diminishes the value that we hold for that person. But let me tell you this: life is not the same. Life won't be the same. You may get your life back, but you've lost someone dear to you. And I think we all do experience some level of post-traumatic stress if or when we've gone through that. So again, your pain is your pain. I remember in my story thinking 2 weeks is all I need. I took 2 weeks off of work, and I was working with caregivers at the Alzheimer's Association at the time. I ran a helpline. So I was back in 2 weeks. My best friend has passed away, and we went through a traumatic journey, and I'm back taking phone calls and listening to other people's journeys and their issues. And I remember in the back of my mind thinking, I'm not ready to do this yet. I hadn't grieved enough. But society and what I told myself was 2 weeks and you need to get back to work. But let me tell you, standing here 14 years later, I still grieve. I may talk about her today at some point and you see my eyes get red. It still hurts. It's still there. Now I'll tell you, as an empowered and inspired care partner coach, I've channeled that. So I still feel the anger. I still feel the hurt, but I've learned to channel it in sharing my story. In my story, others can hear hope and hear tips and things that I learned the hard way that I can give to others. So you grieve how you grieve. If or when you're ever ready to tell your story, just know that your story holds so much power and empowerment for others, and do not be ashamed. Again, whether it's dementia, cancer, any terminal illness, any injury that has thrown us into this, it's hard. It's tough. This is not for the weak. So here's some examples of that ambiguous loss: loss of future, loss of chance to make things right, loss of the role. This also causes relationship changes. You've always been the one in charge of these things, or now a son is caring for the mother. It requires a lot. So again, that guilt can live on our shoulders and is constantly talking to us. Now, again, I'd ask for show of hands, but this is all I could fit on the slide. So I know there are a million sources of that stress we're feeling. Here are just some of the common ones that I wanted to share. So that shock of diagnosis for all of us. Again, when we hear those words, we don't hear anything else. Few treatments, possibly no cure. for the issue and condition that we're facing. The length of time is always a question. If again, with dementia and other conditions, behavioral and physical changes are occurring with this person, we're noticing every single little loss and change as we're providing that care. And again, the relationship and responsibility changes have most likely changed, and we're constantly carrying that fear of the unknown. And for a moment, I want to put a spotlight on the male caregivers. Again, um, caregivers are caregivers. So, on all levels, we experience the same things. We have the same struggles as caregivers, whether we're male or female. That goes into financial concerns, having to take time off or leave work to provide the care. Um, Now, here are some statistics about the male caregiver that was provided by AARP in a 2017 report, Spotlight on Male Caregivers. It was really interesting, and I'll admit some of the things I read, I would agree with. So again, I want to make this very clear. We are all equal as caregivers, male or female, and for the most part, we do experience all the same emotions and issues. But let me just point out a couple things that this report found, and then again, this is just what the survey says. So when it comes to us male caregivers, there were a few things that we seem to struggle with a little bit more. So some of those issues were males reported a much higher discomfort in providing that hands-on care. So what this report found was, as males, we're more likely to possibly hire in-home help, find someone else to provide that daily care. So we're more about the care management than the implementation. This survey also alluded to something interesting. It said that the report found that males are more likely to seek what they called practical solutions rather than addressing the emotions of the situation. Now that's interesting. And again, I'm a male speaking to you, so I will say this sounds like what I see in my daily work with male caregivers often, but also points out to a thing that we struggle with when we're working with someone, especially with a dementia. We talk a lot about the emotions. When we don't understand the words or the person cannot verbally communicate with us, we're stuck with nonverbal. But when they can speak to us, no matter what they say, we teach a lot to identify the emotion behind the words, not worry so much about what they're saying, but the emotion behind what they're saying. And that's what we respond to. So again, this stands out to me because, again, for a male caregiver, this report says that may be a little harder for them to embrace. It's not easy for any of us, but that was interesting information. And here's another bullet point that I want to point out. Males also experience discomfort, higher discomfort, and turning to others for help and support. So I want to take this moment and just share with anyone out there who may be working with male caregivers or wondering, how do we bring male caregivers into the fold and get them to open up? Well, again, we're going to talk facts for a second. And the bottom line is, just like with all of us, I worked with caregivers. I've worked with caregivers for over 15 years. When I will do care consultations, oftentimes I may be talking with a female, and there are points or moments where they may ask to speak with another female because some of the daily life, real issues they're experiencing and feeling may be hard to express to a male. So they feel more comfortable with a female. So with the men, it's the same thing. When I ran the helpline for the Alzheimer's Association, and we would get calls from male caregivers. The first thing my team would do is come find me and say, I think they need to talk to another man. And so I would get on the phone, and here's what I usually would say to him. I want you to feel comfortable. And this is your safe place to say what you feel without any judgment. And then I would usually open it up very softly. So again, not to be sexist, I teach folks to use what we have in front of us to get what we need to get done. So with the male, what I'll do often is, it's like two men hanging out. We'll shoot the breeze. I may talk about a ball game last night, talk about the weather, get him to open up to me about a hobby or things he did or like to do. So again, in this weird formula, it's like with men, we don't want to talk about it, but if we don't talk about it, we'll eventually talk about it. So I hope that makes sense. But what I do in my support groups with predominantly males actually is I give them a different door of entry. Now this could work for anyone. And again, it builds a level of comfortability, but I have something called the men's group. And what we'll do is we'll meet at a local sports bar. Okay. Now, first rule of this is you set a maximum. So in our group, it's okay to have a beer, but our max may be 2 beers. So no one's getting drunk or it become unsafe to drive. But the reason I do that, it could sound weird, but it's a comfortable space for the men. Now, again, when we're there watching a game, eating buffalo wings, it's a slow entry, but someone may start that conversation. And it may be very subtle, but then you see the others open up. And so again, it's a weird formula, but yeah, I will just say it. Often men need another man and more likely to open up to a man, but I know we don't always have that. So again, that formula of creating a safer space, I think this is relevant to all caregivers, but especially male. Research also shows for males, going to a support group in a long-term care facility or one that's held in a hospital or a hospice center, or a church, those are great resources, great pillars of the community. But I'm going to tell you from experience and research, if that male caregiver especially doesn't already utilize that service or go to that place, it's not likely that they're going to come there for that support. So bottom line is a safe, neutral place in the community. You may have better results with both male and female, but in my experience, especially with male caregivers. So now that I've gotten all of that pleasant stuff out of the way, take a deep breath. I know this is the last session of the day, but also as caregivers, if you have friends or even maybe family, neighbors, coworkers that know you're caring for someone, you may hear a lot about this. You need to take care of yourself. Take a break. And self-care, again, involves so much, right? The diet, exercise, sleep, activity, all these things included. And to us as family caregivers, it often can seem like, oh, well, they think it's so simple. What they expect us to do and to be able to do, something like this. Just so serene. And we're just out there on the rock doing our yoga, and we found our center and our inner peace. And now we just go back to that daily life with a smile on our faces. And if you're laughing or shaking your head, yeah, tell me how that actually works. Many people have asked me if you can see my face, if that is me on that rock. I will tell you very profoundly, that is not me on that rock at all. But this is what I think, again, not to downplay those people on the outside that tell us this stuff, but I think their vision sometimes is like it's as easy as this, right? When the reality is, this is probably more an accurate picture of how we feel and what our daily life is. That rope is about to snap. My sanity, my social life, my relationships, I'm about to lose it. So we need to acknowledge that and say, this is the real deal. It's okay. This is normal to feel that way. And let me give you this one big message before we move on. I won't ask you to take yourself off mute, but as a unit, as a group, let's just say this out loud because you cannot say this enough. And I'll tell you, science again, it's not a fact, but they say if you say repeat something 8 to 14 times to yourself, it become a habit or something that you can respond to the guilt with. So let me just say it for you. Caregiving is not for wimps, okay? Now I know we didn't sign up for this, or we were all they had, and you can feel like you have no choice, but you're not a wimp. You're a strong person. You're not a superhero, okay? And we need to understand that because Superman probably doesn't have those 3 a.m. thoughts and those moments where they just can't stop crying and the anger. We're not superheroes, okay? We're human, but we're not wimps. And let me tell you, the purpose of what I do and what REMT does is to help you learn, grow, and become aware of your inner strengths. Now, this doesn't happen overnight, and it's not going to happen miraculously after today's workshop, but maybe today I can plant the seed for you, okay? So let me tell you something about the Caregiver Bill of Rights. And in a more general sense, you may have heard this before, but you have to take care of yourself. Now, the way I will tell you to take care of yourself, and the first coaching tip that I'm going to give you for that is you got to learn how to say no, okay? Again, not easy, not overnight, but the more we try it and attempt it, a little less burdensome it will become. So I just want to show you this and let you know, if you're like me, when I discovered this, I read these things and said, are you sure? Really? I had forgotten. So for me as a caregiver, I had a copy of this in my wallet, on my bathroom mirror, in my car, at work. Again, sometimes that was the response to this guilt. I do have the right to seek help from others. And I have that right to maintain facets of my life that don't include that person. But also I have the right to reject any attempt by that loved one, either conscious or unconscious, to manipulate me through guilt or anger. You have that right. You have the right to take pride in what you're accomplishing and applaud the courage that it's taken to meet the needs of your loved ones. Now, I just want you to take a moment and read these. Now, this is one of the handouts I've given you. Now, again, if you're that family caregiver, make a copy, put this in all those places. It takes time, but you'll need that reinforcement, okay? Now, I want to give credit to the Caregiver Bill of Rights is not something I came up with myself. It was first attributed in a book written by Joe Horn in 1985, caring and helping an aging loved one. I encourage you, if you have not read that book, go find it. It still has very valuable, helpful information. But this is the first thing I'm going to tell you. You do have rights as a caregiver, believe it or not. And again, this takes time, but I want you to know this exists, embrace it, read it, put it in those key places. And here's something else I want to tell you about. So I love this. Now let me explain this. I was working with a family caregiver for many years. And each session we would talk about trying to help her keep something for herself. And just like so many of us, she had become isolated. She provided all the care. She didn't have help from the outside or many resources to hire help. So she was becoming very isolated. And what I was focusing on was her loss, not just of the person and the participatory ambiguous loss, but the loss of the things she enjoyed. We all have to have joy in our lives. So after many sessions of encouragement and empowerment and working with her, she came into my office one day and plopped down these cards. And she said, I made my wish list. So how many of out you how many of you out there have ever had someone come up to you and say, hey, if you ever need anything, just let me know. Or if I ever can be assistance or I can ever help, right? And a lot of times it may come in social settings at work and passing. And often, again, what happens is we don't believe them. They don't really mean that. Or I didn't have anything that I could think of at the moment, or that big thought that, again, if we're being honest, most of us have, they won't be able to understand or do what I do. They won't be able to do it like I do. So for all those reasons or others, we don't accept that help. Now, what this care partner taught me was no more. If someone asks you or offers, their fault for asking, we take it as genuine, okay? If they asked, their fault for asking, but empower yourself. This lady printed out, she went to Office Depot and got blank business cards. And she typed out her wish list, okay? And here's just an example. If someone said to her, if I can ever do anything or I can ever help, they got a card, okay? And look at what she put on those cards. I love these because, again, if I made any progress, do you notice one thing that's not on these cards, okay? It's not being selfish. It's not being mean. But I will tell you, if you don't notice it, there is nothing on this card about her husband. Okay. She started with herself, the captain of the ship, the oil to the car. So just pointing out, make pies and stock my freezer. I love this one because this would be me. Can we play golf and not keep score? Just for fun. Another isolation, she's not been able to get to church, too hard to get him there or embarrassed about what may happen. Good for her to say, bring church to me. And then the last one, can we have tea and maybe do my pills for the week? So this took time. I'm telling you again, in a time span, probably over a year, that we worked up to her being able to do this, but I tell everyone about this. So you keep it simple. You could just write it out on a notepad, make copies, hand them out. Think of like an Amazon wish list. But I want you to know and hear it from your coach. If they offer, we take it as genuine. But don't miss an opportunity. And back to the Caregiver Bill of Rights, don't be embarrassed or afraid or timid. Hand them that card. Because again, it's the fact of we need you. You're meant to be in this position, but how do we keep you there? Okay. So please embrace and try out your version. If I talk to any of you guys next time, I want to hear about your cards. Okay. One other thing that goes along with that, again, I want to be very careful and clear on how I say this. I use the word care partner because there is a difference between care partner and caregiver. But I must also say this very clearly. I understand and I know that at some point, again, with any condition, but especially with Alzheimer's or related dementia, you may not feel like it's a partnership. It may feel very one-sided. And I've had caregivers look at me and say, I'm no longer a care partner. Now I'm just the caregiver. And I understand that. But I also want to go back to this word care partnership. Every relationship boss, employee, friends, husband, wife, care partner, care recipient. There's a relationship there. Okay. And again, I primarily focus on dementia care. So let me talk about it in that form for a second. A person with dementia, their world, despite the stage, their world is 93% nonverbal, right? 7% verbal. So in that world, it's not always about what we say, it's how we say it, our tone, our mannerism. Do we look like we want to be somewhere else? But also on that flip side, even if they're not verbal, by their expressions, um, unfortunately, even throwing or hitting is communication, but they're giving us something, okay? They're giving us something. Now they have to do it in a different way. And it's a journey together. My grandmother taught me many lessons along this journey, and I don't want to make it about me, but I'll give you one that really stands out to me. And this is back to when I realized it's a partnership. So if any of you all out there care for someone and have experienced aphasia, okay, that aphasia, especially with dementia, where now they're struggling to find the word or be able to get that word out. And with my grandmother, she was early enough to realize this was happening. And again, even though I'm a professional, when it was personal, all that goes out the window, okay? And in that moment, I don't know what to say. Remember, I know her worst fear is losing her mind, and I have to give her and have to say something. And that's another trap. We all think we have to say something. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes just being there is what we really need. But in this particular situation, I felt like I had to say something, okay? She looked at me. And again, the clear moment, after experiencing aphasia, she looked at me and said, why can I not get the word out? I'm not dumb. I went to college. I'm very intelligent. And it was breaking my heart. So in this moment, what was natural and normal to me was I grabbed her hand and I said, it's okay. Again, you can see the emotions. I said it was okay. That's all I had. That's what she would have said to me. And another lesson and moment of lucidity, she looked at me and said, it's not okay. I should be able to get the word out. Now, yes, first the guilt came, but then a light bulb went off. Back to the lessons. She was right. It was not okay. How would you feel? So before I get into talking about failure, that's one moment of failure that taught me a big lesson. And she taught me a lesson. It was not okay. That wouldn't be okay to me. So what I learned from that moment, the next time that happened, and in that world of dementia, typically you're going to mess up and say the wrong thing. But remember, most likely they'll forget before you do, and you'll get another chance. So I got my other chance. And in this moment, I remembered what she said, and I grabbed her hand and I said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here with you. So you can take your time. Now, again, did that make it all go away? Did that make it perfectly perfect? No, but I think I got a better message through to her. And if I was ever going to give her anything in that moment, I think that was something she needed to hear. That's the moment I went from caregiver to care partner. Okay. So again, I just wanted to share that with you all. Embrace that. And it may fit you in your situation, but when you see yourself as care partner, it does do something psychologically as well. The research has shown that. It's in the phrases we use. You know, we get taught this. If I said today, oh, I'm going to this conference and it's work and, you know, I kind of have to do it. I'd rather be outside sitting on my porch. I've already talked myself into it's not going to be a fun, good thing. So what's the mood I'm going to bring into this? And I'm not saying this is fun or pleasant, but what I'm telling you is you can survive. you can get through this, and you can be what you need to be for that person. And even though they may have changed physically, mentally, they are still that person. And in some form and fashion, I believe it is a relationship. So another thing I do is help coach caregivers to move them from caregiver to care partner. Okay. Now, before I leave you, and I know I'm getting close to my time, but most of these we've talked about. So I'm just going to, again, uh, touch on these and give you some quick thoughts on each one. So get connected. Again, as a coach, I have to say, whatever the condition, disease, get connected. That could be, for instance, if it's Alzheimer's or dementia, someone like myself, you need to find your coach, okay? Because a coach has played the game, has walked that journey, and can understand the insight of what you're doing and feeling. And sometimes we can come up with good ideas. But know your association. Is it cancer? Is it heart? Is it Alzheimer's? Get connected to your association. Find the resources in your community like Christy, and others like myself that are there to help you get through the daily day-to-day. Often it's not that I need to know how to respond to this question. I'm tired of hearing the question and I'm about to lose it. And I haven't seen my friends in years. I'm not a counselor, but I'm a coach. We go through the emotions, and sometimes normalization helps us get to a better comforted place. So remember, you're in a new place. This is new to all of us. If you're in the world of Alzheimer's and dementia, the things you have always said, what you've always done, are not going to get the results you've always thought. So it's new to us. We're learning as we go. Again, we will say or do the wrong thing, but acknowledge it, understand it, embrace it. You're in a new place. If I just up and left and went to Italy today, it's beautiful and I love their food, but I don't speak their language. So I'd have to acknowledge that there's going to be some barriers. A learning curve is going to exist, but that's okay. That's normal. And please share the golden rules. The golden rules is one of your handouts. And I think this should be given, if you're a caregiver, give it to any and all of your friends. Because again, good intentions, but we often don't think before we act. So showing up at your house unannounced, no matter what we tell you, don't clean up, it's causing more stress. If we come to you with that burden, please don't share your horror stories about that nursing home or that person that stole from you. We were brave enough to open up, okay? So refrain from those horror stories, and please don't create more work for us. Again, in that showing up unannounced, don't abandon us, but give us preparation, and understand even with preparation, plans can change. And back to what I said a minute ago, most often, believe it or not, really what we need is for you just to listen to what we have to say. Often when we come to you as friends, we're not looking for you to fix it. We're not looking for you to have the answer. We're coming to you because we feel safe. An element, back to what I said about male caregivers especially. So we don't expect you to solve it, but respond realistically and supportingly. But if you want to be a true friend, just listen attentively and truly just be with us in that moment. And you got to learn the new language. If this is Alzheimer's or related dementia, what does UTI, what does sniff, what does ALF mean? There's so many more phrases and things that we need to understand and know. So take time to find someone that can help you learn that local language. Keep something for yourself. In my groups, your ticket out of our support groups is to tell us one thing you're going to do or strive to do for yourself in a month, 30 days. Often the first time they get really big-eyed and I don't know, and that's a tough one because we're not trained to think about that. And when I work with an early stage care partner, before we go into the tools and the resources, we start with them writing down like a contract, one thing you promise to keep for yourself. So as we go through this, we also focus on making sure you still have your fishing trip, or you still have that 10 minutes on the porch with your coffee by yourself. We may have to get creative, but we'll figure it out. Be gentle with yourself. It's a journey. We'll make mistakes. That's part of learning. The B+ caregiver, I'll just say it. I don't know if anyone out there was the straight A student all through school, valedictorian. I was not. So it would be foolish for me to think in the world of caregiving, I'm going to be the A+ care partner. Now, I told myself I could be, but I quickly was let down a lot. So if you come into this with a more realistic B+ caregiver, B+ students go to Harvard. B+ students get masters. B+ students teach at universities, but maybe they're more realistic so they didn't kill themselves trying to get the 4.5. They were okay with the 3.0, 3.5. They were more realistic. We've got to come into this that way. And if you're in that, I want to help save you from the big letdown, because that's the other thing. If we come in as super rummin, I will be the A+ caregiver. We're going to have many, many moments of that letdown, and that can bury us sometimes. So let's start out of the gate. This will be tough. Don't be A+. We can B+, but that's normal because we're human, okay? I already told you about your rights and how to be prepared to say yes. The last thing is, let's re-examine failure for a moment. So in this journey, failure happens. And as I've mentioned, failures can turn into lessons if we're willing to embrace them like that. And in the world of dementia and Alzheimer's, I could give you a million of those examples. I said the wrong thing to find out what the right thing was. The day we're at the nursing home and we're walking to her room and I say, we're home. And she let me know that's not her home. Oh my gosh. But guess what? The next day, same situation. We get to the door. I said, we're here. I wouldn't have got there if I probably hadn't done that before. So in this journey, especially with dementia and Alzheimer's, you're going to fail. The failures really help us find the right way, and you don't know till you try. So again, if we can start to re-examine failures and not fear it, that's the other part. We fear it. A+ caregiver is scared to death they're going to fail. And any minor mistake is, catastrophic. So let's go back to also re-examining that failure is letting go of the fear. This is why I tell you one more time, you will say or do the wrong thing. You are human, but the lessons are in that, and try to again see them as lessons. If it's dementia, you'll get another shot. It'll be back. They won't remember you said that, you will, but let's embrace that and let go of that fear. We cannot walk on eggshells anymore. We've got enough to carry and enough to worry about. Well, I did close. I just want to leave this up for a moment to tell you again, I'm not a nonprofit. It's a company, but let me tell you this. People sometimes just need to connect, need to ask a quick question, don't know where to turn. I need to talk to someone who understands. So let me say this to all of you. With my phone number and my email, and please visit my website, you can call me anytime. I will offer a free consultation the first time we talk. Now, it's a 30-minute consultation, but as you probably know, caregivers, 30 minutes, we could do a lot. I could be the lifeline today. And that gives you a great opportunity to get to know me. See if I'm worth it. And if we continue or you decide to do more, I will just say this. I'm my own boss. So I like to say, I think I'm very fair and very affordable in what we can afford and what we can do. But remember, at least that first phone call, a quick email with a question. What should I do here? What's the best way to answer this? I can give that to you very quickly. So don't be afraid to contact me. message me on Facebook, email me. Don't be afraid to call me because you think you're going to get charged. We'll worry about that later. But first time, it's free to everyone. So please take this down, take a snapshot of it. Feel free to reach out anytime. Christy, that's all I have, I promise.